This is all theater. This is all just political theater.
Political theater. Political theater.
Pure political
theater.
Theater.
Political theater.
The
nefarious,
significant and protracted
political
theater for political theater's sake.
I yield back.
From Washington, this is Political Theater, Roll Call's review of the spectacle of politics on Capitol Hill and across the country. I'm Jason Dick. Well, Happy New Year from Political Theater and our many, many guests to come. I'm Jason Dick. I'm the host of this high-quality podcast, and we greet 2026 with open arms. It can be hard to figure out what to focus on in this year, but we're going to do what we do best, which is talk about politics and policy and Congress, and we're going to start it off straight away with our friend Nathan Gonzalez, the publisher of Inside Elections and Roll Call's political analyst, talking about what we're looking for as we head into this illustrious campaign season 2026. Notice I didn't just say it's the midterms. It's not just the midterms for Congress. There's other stuff. There's dog catchers to elect out there, Nathan. There's governors. Coroners.
Yes, I mean, all kinds of things. But it's starting pretty soon. We have the first congressional primaries, at least, coming up in Texas and Illinois, two pretty big states in March. So welcome, to you, Nathan. And it's good to start off the year with you. And Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. And I'm just excited that the kids are back in school.
Yes.
I enjoy family time, but sometimes it's ready to go back to school time.
You enjoy it when their family is outside the door, outside the confines of the house. Yes, I'm well aware. I think the way, when you and I were talking about like what we, how to focus on stuff that, that kind of matters. And I'm not saying that things don't matter, like whether we're going to invade Greenland by the end of the week or things like that. But it can be tough to focus on, the things that will determine election results, say. And that's the business you're in. That's the business I'm interested in and like to cover at Roll Call and for the purposes of this podcast. And what we came across is that, like, yes, it's important, candidate quality, what candidates say, what the president says, what Congress is doing. But we're going to look especially at a series of numbers, some data to see where things are going. And I think that we've got a good, set of data about what we're going to look for, and also what people who are interested in politics might look for. Basically breaking it down to a few things that we can monitor over a period of time. And let's start with the one that we both agreed on right off the bat, which is Trump approval ratings, the presidential approval ratings. This measures, whether it's Gallup or otherwise, measures, whether people approve or disapprove of the job the president's doing.
Yeah, because overall, the environment matters, right? And the things that we're going to talk about are I think, help create or set the stage for what is the political environment right now. And if you were to ask many political consultants, would you rather have the best candidate, the best looking candidate, or would you rather have the most money, or would you have the momentum or the political environment? I think a lot of them would say, I'd rather have the environment, because we have seen good candidates lose in bad cycles for their party, or we've seen some flawed candidates win in environments that are good for their party. And so that's why at this stage, trying to describe or figure out what is the political environment is important. And the presidential job approval rating sets the stage, or is, I think, the primary thing to look at when we're talking about political environment, particularly when it is coupled with Republicans also being in control of Congress, right? You have Republican in the White House. And depending on what number you look for, I was looking at the Nate Silver's average. It's now the Silver Bulletin, where Trump is at a 42% approval rating, a 54% disapproval rating, and it hasn't changed dramatically in months. I know the Gallup numbers are even more pessimistic for the president.
36% is the most recent one, yeah.
Which is one of the lowest ones, but that is in the average. But it's concerning for Republicans, because even though he's not on the ballot, voters are I think midterms are typically a performance review on the president. If they don't like the job the president is doing, I don't know that they will really punish Republicans, but I think they're looking to the other party to come to Washington and be a check and a balance on what the president is doing.
Well, and think about this too, that this president in particular has made himself the center of not just the political discourse, but the cultural discourse.
Everything.
I mean, he's renaming, Performing Arts Center, the Kennedy Center, after himself. He is tearing down the White House, like the East Wing of the White House. He's replacing people on arts boards. I mean, he
had NFL rule change, I think, ideas.
Yeah. I mean, he wanted to weigh in on, what the name of the Washington football team would be if they moved back to DC. I mean, there is nothing that Donald Trump doesn't feel like he's qualified to talk about. And he has a platform. He has his own platform in Truth Social. He's got the cable networks. He's got social media. He has people covering his every iteration, and he is happy to fill the time. So he has set himself up in a situation where he is the narrative. Even if he didn't want to be the narrative, he would be, like most presidents are. Joe Biden was not somebody who went in front of the press all that often, particularly the last couple of years, as he was sort of in ailing health. Donald Trump talks a lot to the press. He talks to the public. He talks on social media. He has made himself like this, this omnipresent force in American and world culture. So there's nobody else to blame, really.
Yeah, and I'm going to workshop this live on a podcast, which is always the best place to do it.
Love it.
But Republicans don't do well in elections that are focused on Trump, right? So meaning in 2016, I would argue the election wasn't really about Trump. It was about Hillary Clinton, right? In Trump won. Republicans did well. In the midterm elections, when it was more focused on Trump, he didn't do well. In 2020, when the election was focused on Trump as the incumbent, Republicans didn't do well. In 2024, when the election was more focused on President Biden and Vice President Harris.
And the economy,
Trump won.
Right.
And so now as we head into a midterm election where the focus is on Trump, in part because he wants to be the focus, and he's at this mediocre job rating level, that's, I think, a problem for Republicans. And if you look at, I like looking at G. Elliott Morris. He has a couple different sites, but if you go to his Strength in Numbers Substack, you can compare any president's, their job rating, to a similar point in the cycle. And the trend is pretty clear that once a president gets on a downward slide with their approval rating, it is hard to pull out. The big exception is George W. Bush after September 11th. But besides that, and right now Trump is tracking closely with where he was in his first term, and that's not great news for the Republican Party trying to maintain control.
Right, and one big noticeable difference also with George W. Bush was that 9/11 happened, 9 months into not even 9 months into his first term. He was still relatively new to the public eye. I mean, there have been George Bushes in public office for a long time, but as far as the presidency goes, he was relatively new to the presidency. And even though he had been the governor of Texas, that we were in a different age where, a candidate could not be as omnipresent as they are now. Trump has been basically the center of the political universe for 10 years now.
Yeah. And when you look closer at individual issues, Trump's job rating on individual issues, the news doesn't get any better, which is different from the first term when his numbers, particularly on the economy, would often be better than on some other issues. But right now he is underwater, or his disapproval rating is higher than his approval rating on every major issue. And so we will see as things go. I know Republicans are expressing optimism about, well, as the policies get implemented and things will get better. And I think, we have to be open-minded that could be the case. But history tells us that it's tough to dig out of the hole or the ditch that the president is in right now.
Yeah, let's look at some of the other numbers because I think that they relate to this. I mean, you mentioned his numbers on the economy, for instance. So I like to look at what can broadly be termed consumer sentiment. The University of Michigan, does a consumer survey, consumer sentiment survey. The U.S. Conference Board does one that tracks it on a monthly basis. And, this is, just the most recent conference board report in December. Here's the headline from them. Conference board confidence weakened for a fifth consecutive month as perceptions of business conditions were negative and apprehension about jobs and income deepened. The conference board confidence index declined by 3.8 points in December to 89.1, for out of 100 from 92.9 in November. This includes an upward revision to November's reading. So it's without getting into their methodology and why it's better or worse or on a par with Michigan's or whatever. It shows a trend, which is that, people, regardless of what the unemployment rate is, regardless of what the inflation rate is, regardless of what the Fed, the Federal Reserve's borrowing rate is, people are pessimistic. They are pessimistic about the economy. They're pessimistic about jobs. We're not creating that many jobs in the private sector. The public sector has been gleefully gutted by Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency with the blessing of Donald Trump. So people are finding it difficult to find jobs, whether they're young or old. Just ask any recent college graduate or send anybody in their late 50s, early 60s how easy it is to find a job right now, and it's not. It doesn't look good. And what's interesting to me too is that there is this, as these numbers kind of pile up. I mean, just yesterday, we're recording this on Wednesday, January 7th. Yesterday, the president was speaking to House Republicans at their retreat at the Kennedy Center, and he said he doesn't know where the public's mind. He says the public isn't concentrating on the right things, and it is perilous to tell the public what to think about. I think if you're explaining, you're losing, right? And it's also difficult to get 330 million people to think one way or another.
Yeah. And I think Republicans and I'll say the president have made a mistake in reading the 2024 elections. I think what you heard from the president was what we've heard from Republicans, that, well, he won the election. He won it big. He finished ahead in the national popular vote. And so he thinks that means that voters want him to do everything in his mind. And I don't think that that's really the case. I think voters were tired of the status quo, tired of the Biden-Harris administration, frustrated with the economy, security, all those things. But I think that's what's coming out. And with the consumer sentiment, it's an important number because it's talking about how voters feel about the economy, right, not the specific numbers. And no matter whichever party is arguing, using the stock market or unemployment rates or whatever the numbers that you just talked about, if they're using that to kind of make the case that everything's fine, then things probably aren't fine, right? I mean, right. That what's more important is, again, how people feel about the economy. And I like the consumer sentiment number also because it's not a number that we're relying on the government to give us, whether it's the jobs number, unemployment, which I think we should probably have at least a little bit or healthy bit of skepticism about numbers that are coming out of the administration right now.
Yeah, and actually, just piggybacking right into that on the unemployment rate. I mean, the unemployment rate, as of November, last month's unemployment report pegged the unemployment rate at 4.6%. Now, this is we didn't get data from during the shutdown. It was a 45-day shutdown, so we didn't have the same reports out during that time. The Bureau of Labor Statistics didn't release them. So 4.6%, the number is getting higher, which very few people like to see. This there was also a real bump in people going off of the federal payroll at the end of September because of the fork in the road or whatever they want to call it. But the buyouts, they were able to stay on the payroll until the end of September, and then they came off. We do not have that data, to see. So we don't know how many of those feds left and are pursuing jobs. The unemployment rate, it measures people who are unemployed and looking for work. It doesn't get into whether people have given up looking for work. It doesn't, get a lot of that sort of data, and it's incomplete. Even so, 4.6%, not great.
Yep. Yeah, and it's we'll see. I think that number is going to be important to watch, but maybe less important than some of these other ones that we're talking about.
And we should mention too that we can get different unemployment rates from the private sector too. ADP, the payroll provider, they release a report on a periodic basis, like measuring private employment rates and so forth. They're not as much of the gold standard as the Bureau of Labor Statistics, but there are other, kind of like outlier polls. They're useful to see just as like, that's interesting. Let's pull that into the mix of things we're looking at, but not necessarily rely on it as the standard, right?
And part of the skepticism that people are hearing from me about this number is the administration, for at least the past couple of months, I believe, have said that 100% of the jobs created in the country were for people that were born in this country, and I don't think that level of detail exists. I mean, I was actually on the inside election side. I'm a CQ roll call political analyst, but also on the inside election side, I would be one of the people they would call, one of those small businesses that they would call. This is many years ago, but to ask, have you created? How many employees do you have? Have you created, new jobs? But we weren't getting into the date of
where
birth,
were you born,
the place of birth. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like that's just, I wanted to explain some of the skeptics. Anytime you hear 100% of something, I'm like, I don't think that level of detail is there. But I could be wrong. People can feel free to chime in the comments, as the kids say.
Yeah, I think that there is good reason for skepticism on that as well. All right, let's also talk about. This is another sort of feeling thing, which is that, it's frequently referred to as wrong track, right track, or right track, wrong track, or satisfaction with the direction of the country. And this is a number that, a number of firms, Gallup, especially, rate, and their numbers go back decades. So American satisfaction with the way things are going in the U.S., in Gallup's most recent note about this, they're taken from December 1st through the 15th of 2025. The number of people satisfied with the way things are going in the United States at this time, 24%. Dissatisfied, 74%. Those are, as far as I can tell, high water marks going back all the way to the beginning of this year, January 2nd to the 15th, still under the Biden administration, and last year in December, there was a high 79% 1 year ago for December 2nd to the 18th of 2024. That means that I think the scientific term is people are cranky.
We are a perpetually pessimistic people. Or Real Clear Politics has a pretty good chart with this question, and it goes back more than 10 years. And we have been the wrong direction, or the wrong track has been higher than the right direction for 10 years now. Now, this is and the last time where the numbers even came close to together was in the spring and summer of 2009. 2009. Now, it got a little closer after the 2012 election, a little closer after the 2020 election, but we are in this perpetual state of dissatisfaction with the direction of the country. Why does that matter now? It matters for the party that is in power, that if the party in power is overseeing a group of people, a group of voters who are dissatisfied with the status quo,
Three-quarters of them,
those voters are going to be open to something different, open to change. And I was talking about the lessons learned from the 2024 election. If we already look at the lessons from the 2026 election, that hasn't happened. If Democrats do well, it will not be because they are in love with the Democratic Party or our country is becoming socialists or whatever. It's going to be because people don't like the state of the economy. They don't like the status quo. They don't like the decisions President Trump is making. So this, another warning sign, a correlated number to this, just in terms of election trends, is that in 11 of the last 13 elections, at least one of the White House, the Senate, or the House has flipped party control. And I think that is related to this number where we're always dissatisfied, we're always looking for change. And so we see this cycle of change over many elections.
And I would add to that too that we're dissatisfied parties overread their, as you said, their mandate, for changing, what they're really looking for may be an impossible task, which is to satisfy a wildly diverse and big country like the United States. And so instead of like kind of going steady, or like steady as she goes, they sort of go for broke, knowing that they may be just one change election away from being in the minority again. So they pack everything into, like the one big beautiful bill, I'm blanking on what the Democrats called their big bill, the Inflation Control Act, or the Inflation Reduction Act, IRA. They just got to shoehorn every single priority that they possibly can, knowing that they're out, instead of figuring out like what is the thing that appeals to the most number of people that we can do, with the least amount of political risk. That's not very sexy, but it may actually be, it may work.
Right. And the
like a lot of things that are not sexy, they work, like the Corolla in my household, for instance.
The president gets in his own way, and I know he's not looking for me for advice, but let's just take immigration.
No,
for
he
example.
did. He called. He said like,
oh, okay, good. Well, have him on hold until we finish this episode. Let's take immigration, for example. He campaigned on, we're gonna deport violent criminals who are in this country illegally. That is an issue that gets widespread. That's a very popular issue. Okay, so that's where he starts. He starts in the political popular position, but then it moved to, well, anybody in this country illegally is a criminal, so we're going to deport those people. Okay, well, you start to lose some support there. Then it's like, well, you were in this country legally under some sort of President Biden program, but now we're ending that, so now you're a criminal. It's like, okay, you lose that. And now it's, well, you're a U.S. citizen, but we don't think you should be a citizen because you said this or you did this. So we're taking that. And you lose every step on that ladder, you lose popularity or you lose people. And so I think that's just a good example of where he goes too far.
Also on a practical basis, I think that, as you said, like some of the proposals at the beginning were, this is quite popular, like, deporting violent criminals, like deporting your nanny, your housekeeper, like the people who like cook the food in the restaurant, like not as popular.
And President Trump candidate Trump had, he had evidence of this in the campaign, right? When Democrats were trying to tie the president to Project 2025 and some of the most, he said, and he realized that it was going to hurt him. Don't even know it. I don't even hear it. But now he got elected. He believes he had a mandate, and now they are implementing a lot of those things that are unpopular. He knew that he distanced himself in the campaign, but now with the power that they have, go ahead and implement it. And they're saying that, actually those things are not popular.
Let's talk about other indicators that are perhaps less of a guide as, whether people approve of the president or whether people are feeling good about the economy or feeling good about the direction of the country. I think that you and I agree, and I think a lot of political analysts agree that these are pretty key issues and numbers to keep track of. There are others that are indicators that are worth following but may not tell the fullest story. Let's talk about congressional approval rates, which are, this is one area where any president, Donald Trump on down, can look at his numbers and maybe not be that happy with it, but then all you got to do is look at the Congress's numbers and say like, well, it's not that bad.
Yeah, exactly.
The latest Gallup's latest numbers on congressional approval are in what the late John McCain from my home state of Arizona called this is down to just friends and family, probably.
And not even all of those people, probably.
Right. Which is in December, 1st to the 15th, 2025, the approval rate for Congress. Do you approve or disapprove of the way Congress is handling its job? Approval rate is 17%.
I'm almost surprised it's that high.
And disapproval rate is 80%. 4% had no opinion.
Yeah, I don't, I think this is, well, first we need to remember that in order for something to get this unpopular, you have to have
You have to try.
and you have to have bipartisan disapproval, right?
You have to have a lot of buy-in to get a result like that.
But people are disapproving for different reasons, right? You have Democrats who are disapproving because Republicans are in control, but you have Democrats who are also disapproving because they don't think Democrats currently on Capitol Hill are doing enough to stand up to the administration. But those Democratic voters are not going to vote for Republicans, right? I mean, they're disapproving of Congress. I guess a concern is do those voters vote at all? But the same is on the Republican side. They're, complaining about Congress because they probably don't believe they're supporting the president enough or doing enough to implement his agenda, but they're not going to vote for Democrats. So I don't think that this number is a good indication of, predictor of electoral results, but it is pretty stunning. I don't know what Congress. It's almost cool to disapprove of Congress. I don't know what Congress could do to improve that image, because someone's always going to be.
Yeah, and one, I think a big caveat too is that what is fairly common, or at least was common for a while, is that people surveyed had a negative image or a negative approval rating of Congress, but they liked their member of Congress. And I don't know how that number is doing. I haven't dived into the numbers enough, but there has been so much turnover in Congress. Congress is a lagging indicator, I think, of the way the country is, but we are starting to see people retire in really big numbers, particularly people on the older side. Your average member of Congress was older than somebody else in the workforce. We have a high number of people in their 70s or 80s who are running the show. Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, has been kind of the exception, right? He's in his 50s. I can relate, and
he's young,
but that wasn't the case. Mitch McConnell is in his 80s. Nancy Pelosi was in her 80s. That was what was more common. So we're starting to see turnover as people retire or die. Just this week, a member, died sort of unexpectedly. Doug LaMalfa, who was not that old, 65 years old, but he died after having an emergency surgical procedure.
There are 127 members that are older than the late congressman.
Yeah, it is I sense a roll call column that you might be writing.
I need to file it after this episode.
Yes.
We're finished this.
But so people are aging out, and then also people who are younger who could have made Congress a career are saying, "I have had enough." Marjorie Taylor Greene's last day in Congress was on Monday of this week. She is not an old person by any measure. Other people, like Byron Donalds in Florida he's in his 40s, right? He's running for governor. There are just a number of people who have said, I am not interested in working here anymore. It's not worth the travel. It's not worth the headache. It's not worth the money. There is no prestige. It's not all it's cracked up to be. And I think that if you don't have a long-standing relationship or even knowledge of who your member of Congress is, then it's easy to lump your member in with all of that 17%, as opposed to, Congress stinks, but I like my guy or gal, because I called them once and they made sure that my uncle's Social Security check got there on time, or whatever. If that goes away, if that relationship between a member and a constituent goes away because they don't even know who that person is, the institution runs the risk of having everybody lumped into this sort of mold of smelly clay of 17% disapproval. To really mix metaphors.
There aren't a lot of politicians who are wildly popular, right? You were talking about the disapprove of Congress, but approve of your member. I think if you're a member of Congress and you're at close to a 1-to-1 with your approval rating, disapproval rating, you're feeling in pretty good shape, because it's not only the weight of the image of Congress, but the weight of a competitive campaign and having, for some members, millions of dollars of negative ads dumped on your head that also factor into that favorability rating. But I'm thinking again out loud about how could Congress really improve that image, and part of it might be self-regulating or limiting themselves, right? Passing and getting headlines out of that, passing stock trading regulations or bans, and things like that to say, hey, Congress is really looking, as an institution, is looking out for the average person rather than themselves. But those measures can be hard to get through.
I'd also be remiss without mentioning too that the late Doug LaMalfa was one of those members who paid attention to what his district's needs were. Whether it was, he was a farmer, and whether it was water rights issues in Northern California, whether it's any number of issues that are specific to the district itself. And even after he, was his district was sort of carved up by the latest redistricting round in California, he said, no, this is my home. I'm going to run and probably lose, to, I think it's Jared Huffman, right, is the person who's in that, what remained of his district. But he's like, no, this is my home and I'm going to represent it. And I'm going to try to make this work because these are the people I represent. And, that's the tragedy, of a loss of somebody like LaMalfa, is that, he's a conservative Republican, his record is very clear about, what side of the street he was on. But he also got a lot of respect from both sides of the street because he wasn't a jerk. He talked to people on both sides of the aisle, presidents of both parties, about his issues. And that may be, as you said, the key to getting to that 1-to-1 approval disapproval rating is just like showing people that you care more about them than you do scoring points on Twitter or whatever.
Yeah. But people are very finicky, right? We talked about people complaining. Two things quickly come to mind. One is when Senator John Boozman of Arkansas got a primary challenge a few cycles ago. And Senator Boozman is, one of the kindest members you'll ever find, but he was being attacked for basically not being mean enough, right? It wasn't his specific voting record. It was that he's not, standing up enough to the Democrats. And so, and also if I shift into apologist for members of Congress, they're asked to do a lot, right? They're asked to, people say they want bipartisanship and working together, which would require them to spend more time in Washington, D.C., having some more social or building relationships. But then if they do that, then people say, well, I never see you at the grocery store. I never see you in the district. Right. You've gone Washington. You move your family. So like, okay, well, I don't really care what people want to prioritize, but these members, particularly the West Coast and the Rocky Mountain members, they cannot be in two places across the country at the same time, spending huge amounts of time in two very different places.
Let's talk about.
I didn't know we were going there, but that's all right.
No. I think it's great. Like that, because it's not. There isn't an easy solution. It's not one thing or another. But it's not an easy job. But it's also, the good news is there are ways. There are things that a member of Congress can do. To do a better job. We'll see. We'll see if it. Let's talk about maybe your least favorite indicator. The generic ballot test.
Well, there's one other indicator that I'll mention at the end that I like least, but let's talk about the generic ballot.
Wow. Okay, so this is Nathan Gonzalez's second least favorite indicator for how things are going in an election cycle. The generic ballot is, this is something that pollsters love to ask, and a lot of journalists like to report on. It's just the latest, if you will. The New York Times has a good sort of aggregator. There are other people who aggregate that. I'm looking at the New York Times aggregation of it. They've got the most recent January 2nd through 5th of YouGov, polled, and Democrats have a 6-point margin. It's 45%, 39%. 45% would prefer a generic Democrat to a generic Republican, whatever that means. Morning Consult had it, a little lower, 1 and 2 point margins. There are, it's kind of all over the place, but it seems to be settling around like 5-6% right now. But let's talk about why. If you're Democrats, you love to hear this, right? And even if you're a Republican, you can say that gives us more, incentive to raise money or to go to our donors and say the generic ballot's not looking good. I'm going to need a little bit more of your super PAC money or whatever. So, but let's talk about why this is meh.
in terms of indicators?
Second most
it
meh.
it is a number that can be helpful in analyzing the environment. But my main grievance is that our elections are not between generic candidates.
Right.
There's no such thing as a generic Republican and generic Democrat, even to the most boring members of Congress or the most boring candidates, right? These are people with strengths and weaknesses and higher or lower levels of name identification, different fundraising levels, different. And so I would prefer to wait as the cycle progresses and get data in individual races about where things stand, right? Individual House race, Senate, governor, whatever it might be, between people, real candidates, because I think that is better. And in the meantime,
This must be why you interview these candidates.
I mean, it's fun. We try. If you are out there and we haven't talked to you, feel free to ping us and Mel and Danielle on the roll call side. We'll sit down. But in the meantime, I think we can look at something like actual election results. And right now, over the course of 2025, there was a clear trend, whether it's in special elections or regularly scheduled off-year elections where Democrats are overperforming, right? Between 12 to 15, 16 points. Sometimes it was in Democratic areas, sometimes in Republican areas, but there was a clear trend of election results. And I think that I would prefer to look at those election results and use that as a better barometer, I think, for things. Now, sure, you could say that the turnout might be different or in the November 2026 elections, but we have a growing data set. And in some of those races, such as the Tennessee 7th District, turnout was not dismal. I mean, it was close to a regular midterm. And so if Republicans are just relying on individually dismissing results, that's fine. But when you look at I think the trend is clear.
Yeah. You could say that about a lot of like different candidates. I mean, they kind of picked over Tennessee and Virginia. They can say like, well, when Earl Sears was not a great candidate and Trump didn't endorse her and blah, blah, blah. But it's like, when everything goes one way. And I guess that's the other thing too, is that like we seldomly get a truly like mixed result in an election. They usually go one way. I remember like one of the earliest campaigns that I covered was in 2004, and Democrats, had nominated John Kerry as to be their presidential nominee to go up against George W. Bush, who was seeking a second term. They recruited what I thought, and I think a lot of people thought, was a pretty strong class of Democratic candidates for the Senate. And almost every single one lost. Like, whether it was, I don't want to get too like in the deals, but like, whether it was Tennessee, whether it was South Carolina, whether it was Arizona, like they had good candidates and every single one lost. And that's where the country was. That's where the electorate was at that point.
And if we get a mixed result, it'll be because of the Senate map, that the current class of states that are up this cycle are Republican leaning. There are more Republican leaning states. And so that mixed result will be a result of the battleground, not that voters were kind of picking and choosing where they liked Democrats or where they like Republicans.
And it also like gets back to that it's similar. It's a similar dynamic as 2018, in the House. Democrats cleaned up and they've won 40 plus seats, to take the majority. Senate Republicans gained 2 seats,
right?
Even though the mood of the country was a little sour, on Republican rule and the Republican president, Donald Trump at the time. But they gained 2 seats because just where the map was, was very favorable to them. There were more Republican senators running, or more more open seats in Republican leaning states, or more vulnerable Democratic incumbents in Republican leaning areas like Indiana or North Dakota. So.
Right. And I've heard, particularly after the Tennessee 7 special, where Republicans were trying to latch on to one of the 2 rare House midterm cycles where the president's party hasn't lost seats. One of those was 2002. And this Republican consultant, who's been around for a long time, and I feel like should know better, was talking about how Republicans bucked the trend in 2002 by gaining seats because they had great candidates. And I would argue that, well, President Bush's job approval rating was 68%, right? It had fallen from almost 90% post September 11 down to 68%. So that's where George Bush was in the mid 2002 midterm elections. And now we're talking at Trump being at 42% approval rating. So I don't think that necessarily that's not an apples to apples comparison.
Right. All right. Now I'm curious, what's your most meh indicator?
Oh my gosh, Jason.
If generic ballot is the second most meh, what's the most meh?
The betting markets. I feel like they are starting to get more and more attention, and I don't have faith in them. I don't pay attention to them. I don't feel like, I don't know. I'm that will supplant the generic ballot in my mind as the thing I will pay attention to the least in this.
And I know, but it's more prop bets. Prop bets on DraftKings over who's going to win in Texas 25 primary.
And beyond not thinking that they really have any value in terms of what I feel like I do as an analyst, but I think it could get into dangerous territory when you're talking about prop bets and who's going to win or not, and people, the more money that gets infused into anything, I don't know that we look back and say, well, this is better. Like, can we all say that with sports, that betting, sports is better now because there's more money in sports.
I've to be honest, I've pared back the sports podcasts I've listened to because I don't want to listen to people talk about the betting markets, the odds, the over under, all this stuff. I mean, it is. I mean, maybe this is the way people feel about politics when we talk about polling and stuff like that. But it just seems like there's less talk about the whether say somebody has like a hole in their offensive line and that's like leading to quarterback injuries and that's why this team is out of the playoff picture. It's like there's more attention paid to we got 3.5 points at home because and I've just found other things to occupy my time because it just doesn't interest me and it actually kind of just annoys me. And I understand this is paying the bills, otherwise, these big betting companies wouldn't be sponsoring these podcasts and sponsoring segments of the podcast where betting experts are talking about that. But I'm just like, this doesn't interest me. They've lost me on it.
And in the political world, we're already seeing in other outlets these markets being reported on as if they were polls. Now, I know that polls can be flawed, but I think that there's valuable data to get. But they're being portrayed as the same thing, and it's not the same. It's not the same thing. So I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully, this will spark some conversation. But I'm just not a believer. My brain is too small to spend too much.
Well, maybe we'll have to come up with new phrases like, it used to be, oh, they just blow it all at the track. Now it's like, oh, they just blow it all on their political betting app. I don't know. Somewhere Bukowski is just like turning in his grave saying like, that's not gambling. That's not gambling. Gambling is going to the races, going to the, and seeing the bleak humanity of it all.
And we should say, maybe wrapping it all up, as we get closer to election, particularly late summer into the fall, we will have a lot of polling data on individual races, right? And that's what matters. We do not have national elections for anything. We have an electoral college for president. It's state by state in the Senate. It's district by district in the House. So following individual races with help from roll call inside elections, that is how we get our government is at an individual level.
That's a good place, I think, to end for this podcast.
I wasn't given the authority to end it, but I guess I decided to.
Well, I mean, what's the old joke about like how do you end the story? Well, you just put a period at the end of the sentence. Like there we go. I look forward to as I stated for those watching this on YouTube. This is a new studio in our newsroom. We're trying a few new things out. There will be more new stuff to come, but like we're this podcast, we're happy to be, going on, my God, like this 10th year at least or something like that. I don't know, for, quite a bit, zeroing in on 400 episodes, I think, fairly soon here. So
it makes sense. I'm 25, so I think my first appearance was when I was 15. So
yeah, no, I remember it like the
makes sense. Checks out.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Nathan, and we'll catch you another time. And thank you all for listening to the podcast. If you would like more, sign up for our newsletter at rollcall.com under the newsletter section on the website, and we'll send you this every week with my gibberish and musings that go along with the podcast. In the meantime, see you next time.